The mission brief had said, temperate climate. The mission brief was a lying piece of garbage. Lieutenant Kira Bellamy trudged through wind that felt like it was actively trying to kill her, snow hitting her helmet hard enough to sound like gunfire, visibility approximately 0. Her powered armor's environmental systems were working overtime and still barely keeping up. "This is fine," she muttered into her comm. "Everything's fine. I've been colder." She hadn't been colder. Michigan winters had nothing on this. The Vrakken diplomatic convoy was supposed to be a milk run. Escort some dignitaries across neutral territory on planet Helios 22. Simple. Safe. The kind of assignment you gave someone recovering from actual combat. Then the planet's weather decided to throw a tantrum, and the convoy's environmental shields decided to catastrophically fail. In front of her, the transport vehicles had stopped. Vrakken adults were emerging, 8 feet of scaled muscle and defensive spikes, looking confused and angry. Their biology could handle cold. They'd evolved on a planet with harsh winters, but the cubs, 3 of them, juveniles, maybe 3 years old in human terms, size of large dogs, covered in scales that hadn't fully hardened yet. They were shivering. Badly. "The shield generators are non-functional," Warlord Kreth announced, his translator making him sound even more pissed than he probably was. "We need shelter." Kira checked her tactical display. Nearest shelter, 18 kilometers. In this storm, that might as well be 1800. "How long can the cubs last?" she asked. "Unknown. They have never been exposed to temperatures this severe." "That's not an answer." "Then the answer is, not long." The cubs were huddled together, making distressed chirping sounds. Their scales were turning a dark blue, which, according to Kira's extremely rushed xenobiology briefing, meant they were in serious trouble. Adult Vrakken didn't do well with rapid temperature changes. Their biology was efficient but inflexible. The cubs had even less tolerance. Kira did some math. 18 kilometers. Storm getting worse. Cubs already hypothermic. They wouldn't make it. "Okay," she said. "New plan." She started disengaging her armor's outer layer seals. "What are you doing?" Kreth demanded. "Saving your kids. Help me get them inside this thing." "Inside your... That's insane." "Yeah, probably. But they'll be warm." Her armor was military grade, designed for extreme environments. Multiple layers. The outer shell was for protection and power systems. The inner layer was essentially a climate-controlled suit. And inside that, there was a human generating approximately 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit of body heat. Kira popped the chest seals. The cold hit her like a physical blow. "Quickly," she said through chattering teeth. "Before I change my mind." Kreth stared at her. The other Vrakken warriors stared at her. The cubs just kept shivering. Then Kreth moved. "You will die," he said as he lifted the first cub. "Probably. This is against 17 protocols." "Yep. The cubs will injure you. They're spikes. I know. Let's do this fast before I remember I'm terrified of needles." They stuffed the first cub in, then the second, then the third. 3 confused, freezing, spike-covered cubs now pressed directly against Kira's body. She sealed the armor back up. "This is either very brave or very stupid," Kreth observed. "Can't it be both?" The cubs were chittering in confusion. Kira could feel their cold scales against her skin, could feel the sharp points of their defensive spikes pressing through her undersuit. "It's okay, babies," she said, trying to keep her voice calm. "We're just going to be really uncomfortable together for a while." Then the first spike punctured her side. "Ow. Okay. That's... ow. Guys, if you could maybe not wiggle." The cubs, terrified and confused, wiggled more. 30 minutes in, and Kira was pretty sure she'd made a terrible mistake. The cubs were warming up. That was good. They were also becoming more active. That was bad. Every movement drove their spikes deeper into her skin. Her armor's medical systems were going haywire, trying to seal the punctures, but there were too many. "Status?" Kreth's voice crackled over the comm. "Peachy," Kira lied. "How's the shield repair going?" "Slow. Another hour minimum." Her suit's internal display was showing concerning numbers: core temperature dropping, blood pressure fluctuating, multiple puncture wounds registering as moderate concern. But the cubs were alive. She could feel them breathing, could feel them getting warmer. Worth it. If you guys could stop wiggling, she said through gritted teeth, that'd be great. Some of those spikes are hitting organs I'm pretty fond of. One cub made a sound that might have been curious, nuzzled closer, more stabbing. Ow. Okay. Yes. I see you. Good boy. Please stop moving. The blizzard howled outside. The adult Vrakken worked on the shields, and Kira slowly froze while keeping 3 cubs warm enough to survive. Her armor's heating had failed 10 minutes ago. Now, it was just her body heat, and that was steadily dropping. After 45 minutes, the cubs stopped shivering. 5 minutes later, so did Kira. That's not good, she thought distantly. That's the opposite of good. Her vision was going dark around the edges. The cubs felt warm now, almost hot, which meant she was very, very cold. Kreth, she tried to say. Her comm crackled. Cubs are stable. Get them out when... She couldn't finish the sentence. Everything went black. When Kira woke up, she was in a medical bay and everything hurt. Not the dull ache of healing. The sharp, angry pain of severe tissue damage that hadn't finished healing yet. She tried to sit up, failed, gave up. Patient is conscious, someone said. Station Dr. Yevgeny, human, thankfully. Welcome back, Lieutenant. Cubs? Kira croaked. Fine. Healthy. Playing. In the corner, actually. Kira turned her head, slowly because it hurt, and saw them. 3 Vrakken cubs, scales now a healthy dark green, wrestling with what looked like medical supplies. They're okay, she breathed. Yes. You, however, are not. Yevgeny pulled up a hollow display. Severe frostbite across 40% of your body. Internal bleeding from multiple puncture wounds. Grade 3 hypothermia. You were clinically dead for 90 seconds. But the cubs are fine? That's what you're focusing on? Yeah. Yevgeny sighed. Yes. The cubs are fine. Better than fine. Perfect health. Good. There's a problem, though. Of course there was. The Vrakken Empire is accusing you of biological warfare. Kira blinked. I'm sorry, what? Apparently, prolonged physical contact with human body chemistry has altered the cubs. They're exhibiting abnormal behaviors. Like what? Pack bonding, seeking comfort, showing affection. Yevgeny pulled up more data. The Vrakken consider this a form of psychological warfare. Kira stared at him. I kept them from freezing to death. Yes, but you also accidentally made them emotionally dependent on human contact. They've been trying to remove the cubs from this room for 3 days. The cubs won't leave. They get distressed when you're not visible. So I domesticated them? That's the term the Vrakken are using, yes. By keeping them warm. By exposing them to extended human biochemistry during a critical development period. Yevgeny looked uncomfortable. They're considering this an act of war. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. And yet, here we are. Kira looked at the cubs. They'd stopped playing and were watching her. One made a happy chirping sound. Hey guys, she said. All 3 scrambled over, climbed onto her bed. Nuzzled against her despite the medical equipment and her injuries. Ow. Hi. Gentle, please. Still healing. They settled around her, careful not to hurt her. Warm, safe, content. They really won't leave you, Yevgeny said quietly. I noticed. The door opened. Station Commander Volkov entered, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. Lieutenant Bellamy, glad you're awake. Sir? We have a situation. He pulled up a diplomatic memo. The Vrakken Empire has filed formal charges. Unauthorized biological intervention, genetic contamination, psychological warfare against non-combatant juveniles. I kept kids from dying. I know, I've explained that. Multiple times. Volkov rubbed his face. They don't care. From their perspective, you've fundamentally altered their young. Made them soft. They're 3. They're future warriors. We're supposed to be anyway. Now they're... He gestured at the cubs purring against Kira. This. Happy? Compromised. The door opened again. Kira's heart sank. 12 Vrakken warriors entered, full ceremonial armor, armed, led by Warlord Kreth himself. They looked at Kira like she'd personally insulted their entire species. "The human will stand trial," Kreth announced formally, "for crimes against our young." Kira looked at the cubs. They looked back, confused by the sudden tension. "This is going to be a whole thing, isn't it?" she muttered. "Yes," Yevgeny confirmed. "A very large, diplomatic thing." One of the cubs chirped and nestled closer. Worth it, Kira thought again, even if they did decide to execute her for it. The emergency tribunal convened on Nexus Station 8, neutral territory selected specifically because nobody wanted this mess happening on their home turf. Kira was wheeled in, still hooked to medical equipment. Her frostbite was healing slowly. The puncture wounds were sealed but tender. She looked like someone who'd recently survived dying, which was accurate. The tribunal chamber was packed. Representatives from 12 species. Vrakken delegation front and center, radiating fury. Council observers. Academic researchers. And somehow 3 cubs who absolutely refused to be left behind. "This is a formal proceeding," the tribunal judge announced. Horvath, a Kryn with too many eyes and infinite patience. "Lieutenant Kira Bellamy, you stand accused of unauthorized biological intervention, genetic contamination, and psychological warfare against non-combatant juveniles of the Vrakken Empire." "I kept kids from freezing," Kira said flatly. "The accused will refrain from commentary," Horvath said without heat. The Vrakken prosecutor, a massive warrior named Vrakken, stepped forward. "We present evidence of contamination. Holographic displays activated. Footage of the cubs over the past week, seeking physical contact with medical staff, showing affection, refusing to engage in aggressive play that Vrakken juveniles typically enjoyed. These behaviors," Vrakken declared, "are antithetical to Vrakken nature. Our young are warriors in training. They should display dominance, aggression, independence. Instead, they seek comfort. They bond. They trust." "Sounds like they're healthy kids," Kira muttered. "Lieutenant," Horvath warned, "these are not healthy behaviors for Vrakken." Thrakken's scales darkened with anger. "She has fundamentally altered them. I literally just kept them warm. You exposed them to prolonged human biochemistry, to your skin, your sweat, your breath, all containing compounds that triggered neurological changes. The cubs, sitting in a supervised area, were watching Kira. Not the prosecutor. Not the tribunal. Just Kira. One made a happy chirp when she looked at them. Even now, Vrakken said, they seek her attention. They ignore proper Vrakken authority figures. They have imprinted on a prey species. We're not prey, Kira said. We're persistence predators. There's a difference. You are soft. You lack natural weapons. One of the cubs escaped its handler. Just ducked under their arm and bolted straight for Kira. Chaos erupted. Guards moved to intercept. The cub dodged with surprising agility and launched itself into Kira's lap. Ow. Okay, hi, buddy. Gentle, please. Still got puncture wounds from you and your siblings. The cub settled against her, making contented sounds. The courtroom went silent. Kira petted the cub automatically. What was I supposed to do? Let them die? Death, Vrakken said coldly, is preferable to contamination. Kira stared at him. You're joking. I am not. A warrior who dies young dies with honor. A warrior who is domesticated is no warrior at all. They're 3 years old. They are future defenders of our empire. They're babies who were freezing to death, Horvath called for order. It took 5 minutes to get the cub back to the supervised area. It went reluctantly, making distressed chirps the whole way. Then the medical report dropped. A xenobiologist, looked like a Thalasian, all crystals and clicking sounds, activated a new display. Analysis of the cub's biochemistry reveals trace amounts of human hormones, oxytocin specifically, the bonding hormone. You've bond-marked them, Vrakken said, triumphant. This is proof of biological warfare. I've what now? Kira asked. The xenobiologist expanded the display. Human skin secretes multiple compounds: pheromones, hormones, trace proteins. Most species have minimal reaction. However, Vrakken cubs during their developmental window are exceptionally receptive to external biochemical signals. Can you translate that to human? Kira asked. You accidentally drugged them with trust hormones. I what? Prolonged physical contact with human skin triggers oxytocin production in most mammalian and reptilian species. The cubs received an extended dose during a critical development period. Combined with the positive association of warmth and safety, their neural pathways have been optimized for human bonding. Kira looked at the cubs. They looked back, scales reflecting the harsh courtroom lighting. I was dying, she said quietly. I was freezing to death. I wasn't thinking about biochemistry. I wasn't thinking about neural pathways. I was thinking, these are kids. They're cold. I'm warm. This is the solution. The solution, Vrakken snarled, was to let nature take its course. Nature was killing them. Then they would have died honorably. They would have died scared and cold, Kira's voice cracked. They were chirping in distress. They were shaking. They were 3 years old and dying because your shields failed. I had a way to stop that, so I did. The cubs were making distressed sounds now. Every time someone raised their voice at Kira, they got agitated. This was not helping her case. The cubs are exhibiting protective responses toward the accused, the xenobiologist noted clinically. They perceive raised voices as threats, classic bonding behavior. Classic contamination, Vrakken corrected. Horvath called for recess. As the chamber cleared, a Vrakken elder approached Kira. Old, scarred, scales faded with age. Elder Vexthan, according to his insignia. High-ranking enough that guards stepped aside. He studied Kira for a long moment. Tell me true, human. Would you do it again? Kira didn't hesitate. In a heartbeat. The elder's scales rippled. Surprise, maybe. Or concern. Even knowing the consequences? The consequences are that 3 kids are alive. Yeah, I'd do it again. You would sacrifice yourself for young, not of your species. They're kids. Kids shouldn't die when there's a way to save them. Vexthan was quiet. Then, that is what I feared. He walked away. Kira wasn't sure if that was good or bad. During the recess, someone made a terrible mistake. They checked the records. A junior analyst, trying to be helpful, pulled data on human employment across council space. Specifically, humans working in positions involving alien juveniles. The number was 8,234. Someone decided to cross-reference behavioral reports. Then someone else decided to publish their findings. Within an hour, academic papers were flooding the networks. Human biochemical influence on cross-species development. Oxytocin transfer patterns in multi-species childcare settings. The domestication effect. Human contact and juvenile behavioral modification. Every single facility employing human childcare workers showed the same pattern. Alien young displaying increased trust behaviors, decreased aggression, enhanced social bonding across species lines. Panic spread through council chambers like wildfire. We need to recall all human staff, one delegate insisted. And replace them with whom? Another countered. Human caregivers have the lowest incident rates in the sector. Because they're chemically manipulating the young. Because they're effective caregivers. Economic analysts weighed in. If we ban human childcare workers, we'll need to restructure 70% of our youth facilities. The cost alone. Military strategists had different concerns. If humans can bond-mark any species young, that's a strategic asset. Or a weapon, depending on perspective. Are we seriously discussing children as weapons? We're discussing the fact that humans have been biochemically influencing alien young on a massive scale. Kira sat in a waiting area, listening to all this through the open doors. I just didn't want them to die, she said to no one in particular. Dr. Yevgeny, waiting with her, patted her shoulder. Welcome to Galactic politics, where good intentions become international incidents. I hate this, Everyone hates this. The cubs were in an adjacent room, visible through a transparent barrier, still watching Kira, still chirping whenever she looked at them. They really won't leave you alone, Yevgeny observed. I noticed. The Vrakken consider this evidence of contamination. The Vrakken can… Kira stopped herself. The Vrakken have a different cultural context. Diplomatic of you. I'm trying not to make this worse. Too late for that. The chamber doors opened. A new group entered. Not tribunal staff, not delegates, Vrakken, but different. Older. Wearing ceremonial regalia that made the warrior's armor look plain. Oh no, Yevgeny said. Those are… the cubs' actual parents, Kira finished. Yeah, I figured. Matriarchs and patriarchs of 3 major Vrakken clans. The cubs' biological parents who'd been off-world during the diplomatic mission, and were just now arriving. They walked past the tribunal chamber, ignored the delegates, went straight to the observation room where their cubs were. The cubs saw them, made excited sounds, ran to them. Then, while still being held by their parents, turned to look at Kira through the barrier, chirped at her, reached toward her. The parents' expressions were unreadable. One of the matriarchs approached the barrier, studied Kira, looked at her cubs, back at Kira. We demand private audience, she announced. With the human, and our young. Now. The tribunal judge looked like he wanted to refuse, looked at the matriarch's rank insignia, decided against it. Granted, Horvath said. Clear the chamber. Kira stood, medical equipment and all. Guess we're doing this. Good luck, Yevgeny whispered. I'm gonna need it. The parents led Kira to a private room. The cubs followed, chirping happily. And the door closed on what might be her execution or her salvation. Kira honestly wasn't sure which. The private chamber was smaller than Kira expected. Intimate. Just her, 3 sets of Vrakken parents, the cubs, and a handful of tribunal observers. The cubs immediately went to Kira, climbed around her chair, careful of her injuries, chirping happily. The parents watched this in silence. You nearly died, the lead matriarch finally said. Vrashka, clan leader, decorated warrior. Yeah, Kira said. That happens sometimes. For our young, who are not your species. They're kids. Kids shouldn't freeze. Long silence. The cubs settled around Kira's feet, content just to be near her. This changes things, Vrashka said. Another parent stepped forward. Patriarch Thelkor. The prosecution claims you weaponized our young. Kira was exhausted. Her frostbite ached. The puncture wounds pulled. She was done being diplomatic. I cuddled them. That's it. I kept them warm because I was the only heat source available and they were dying. If that's a weapon, then every parent in the galaxy is armed. One of the cubs brought her water, held the container carefully in its mouth, offering it. Thank you, sweetheart, Kira said, taking it. Another cub was arranging pillows behind her back. The third was trying to adjust her medical equipment to be less uncomfortable. The parents stared. They're trying to care for you, Vrashka said quietly. Yeah, they're sweet kids. This is not Vrakken behavior. Maybe it should be. Vrashka's scales rippled, not anger, something else. You do not fear them. You do not see them as threats. They're 3 years old. They are apex predators. They're babies who got cold and scared. Kira looked at the matriarch. I've read the files. I know Vrakken culture values strength, independence, warrior training from birth. But they were dying, and I couldn't let that happen. I'm sorry if that offends your cultural values. I'm not sorry I did it. The parents conferred quietly in their own language. The cubs, sensing tension, pressed closer to Kira. Finally, Vrashka turned to the observers. The human will not stand trial. She will stand witness. The observers looked confused. Because we need to understand what she has shown us. That protection transcends species. And that, apparently, is a human trait. Back in the tribunal chamber, everything changed. The parents presented their case, not as prosecutors, as advocates. Our cubs were dying, Vrashka announced to the packed chamber. The human sacrificed her health to save them. She activated displays. Kira's medical records, the frostbite damage, the internal bleeding, the hypothermia that had stopped her heart. She could have prioritized her survival, removed the cubs when they became painful, when her core temperature dropped, when her systems began failing. Vrashka's voice was steady. She didn't. Another parent stood. She let our cubs pierce her skin repeatedly, 43 separate puncture wounds, rather than remove them from warmth. This is not aggression. This is sacrifice. But the contamination, an academic started, is adaptation, Thelcor cut him off. Our young learned trust because she was trustworthy. They learned protection because she protected them. They learned that not all non-Vrakken are threats, because she proved it. You call it contamination, Vrashka said. We call it education. Kira sat in her chair, watching aliens debate her decisions like she wasn't there. The cubs sat at her feet, occasionally making protective sounds when voices got too loud. The question, Vrashka continued, isn't whether the human contaminated our young. It's whether contamination is the correct term for teaching them that protection transcends species boundaries. The Vrakken prosecutor, Vrakken, stood stiffly. You're suggesting we've misunderstood the entire situation. Vrashka's scales rippled. Amusement, maybe. I'm suggesting that humans don't see species. They see children. And that terrifies you. Silence. It should, she added. Because if humans will sacrifice themselves for any species young, then everything we know about tribal loyalty is wrong. And that means we need to reconsider our entire approach to child development. The tribunal deliberated for 6 hours. The verdict was unanimous. Acquittal. But they didn't stop there. Emergency council investigation triggered into all human-alien youth interactions across council space. The data came back fast. Too fast. Researchers had been compiling it during the trial. 8,234 humans, working with alien young. Every single facility showing the same patterns. Increased trust behaviors, enhanced cooperation, decreased xenophobia. But also, and this was the part that changed everything, better social adaptation, lower anxiety, improved conflict resolution. The military strategists panicked. This is a weapon. Biochemical manipulation. Education reformers countered. This is the future of cross-species integration. Economic analysts calculated projected costs of banning versus expanding human childcare workers. The numbers were staggering. Some species immediately banned humans from youth-related positions. Cultural contamination, they called it. Others made human oversight mandatory. Evidence-based best practices, they called it. The market for human childcare workers exploded. Salaries tripled overnight. Recruitment campaigns flooded Earth's networks. Kira watched all this from her hospital bed. The cubs refused to leave. Station Medical had given up trying to separate them. Station Commander Volkov visited. You've changed Galactic childcare policy. I just kept them warm. You did more than that. He pulled up the reports. You proved humans will sacrifice themselves for any young, any species. That's not normal, Lieutenant. It should be. Volkov studied her. You really believe that? Yeah. That's what scares them. The cubs chirped, demanding attention. Kira scratched behind their ear ridges automatically. What happens now? She asked. Depends. The council's offering you a position. Director of Cross-Species Child Development. Galaxy-wide authority. Unlimited budget. Kira laughed, regretted it because her ribs hurt. Absolutely not. The cubs chirped sadly. She looked at them. They looked back with those big eyes that could probably also kill you but were currently just looking hopeful. Kira sighed. Fine. But I want hazard pay and better armor insulation, because I'm not doing that again. The freezing? The improvised emergency childcare. Next time, we're bringing proper thermal blankets. Next time, Commander, if you think this is the last time I'm going to run into kids who need help, you haven't been paying attention. Volkov smiled. That's what I thought you'd say. The paperwork's already filed. Of course it is. 6 months, Kira thought. 6 months to heal, get the program started, figure out how to turn accidentally saved some cubs into an actual policy framework. The cubs settled around her, warm and content. Worth it, she thought for the 1,000th time. Even if it meant she was now responsible for reforming Galactic childcare. 6 months changed everything. Kira ran the cross-species development program from an office that was half administrative space, half daycare. The cubs, now adolescents, each the size of a small car, worked as her assistants. They helped coordinate schedules, supervised younger juveniles, and occasionally intimidated bureaucrats who tried to cut funding. The Bellamy Effect became official terminology. Academic papers, policy documents, training manuals. Kira's response, "Oh God, please no." But the name stuck. Stations across council space implemented human warmth protocols, literal emergency procedures involving human body heat as life support. Human biochemical bonding was recognized not as contamination, but as beneficial developmental influence. 8,000 human childcare workers became 20,000, then 30,000. Recruitment couldn't keep up with demand. Species that had been xenophobic for millennia now ran mixed-species daycare centers. Cubs that grew up with human contact showed radically different behaviors. More cooperative, less aggressive, forming bonds across species lines that previous generations would have considered impossible. Then the first generation report came in. Human-raised cubs reaching maturity. Behavioral analysts flagging anomalies. Kira read the report, bracing for disaster. The anomaly: they preferred negotiation over combat. The Vrakken military wasn't sure if this was disaster or evolution. Statistical analysis told the story clearly. Regions with human childcare workers showed measurably reduced conflict, not because humans were peacekeepers, because young raised with cross-species contact didn't see others as inherent threats. The 3 cubs Kira had saved became living proof. Now full-grown, they traveled with her as ambassadors, demonstrating Vrakken-human cooperation, showing other species what was possible. Not everyone was happy about it. "This is cultural contamination," some species argued. "You're erasing what makes us unique." "This is the future," others countered. "Either we adapt or we stagnate." Kira was caught in the middle, still just trying to do her job, which now involved significantly more politics than she'd signed up for. The cubs were protective, large enough now to actually defend her if needed. Station security was half terrified, half amused. "They're really gentle," Kira insisted as her 3 assistants arranged furniture in the conference room. "Usually." "They're apex predators," the security chief said. "They're my teaching assistants. Stop being dramatic." One cub, the smallest one, ironically named Tiny by station personnel, carefully placed a datapad on the table without crushing it. The display showed tomorrow's schedule. "See? Very gentle. That thing could bite through hull plating." "But he doesn't. Because he's a professional." Tiny chirped happily at the praise. Then the Thalorian delegation arrived. The Thalorians had been at war with the Vrakken for 2 centuries. Active conflict, territorial disputes, deep cultural hatred. Their leader, Ambassador Shelvan, wanted to meet the human who'd changed everything. "I didn't change anything," Kira said when they met. "You taught predators to care for prey species," Shelvan replied, her crystalline form refracting the light. "That changes everything." Kira looked at her 3 cubs, now serving as diplomatic escorts. "I just kept them warm. You did far more than that, and now we must adapt to this new reality." Shelvan gestured to the cubs. "May I?" Kira nodded. Shelvan approached. The cubs watched, but didn't react aggressively. One lowered its head, allowing her to touch its scales. "Remarkable," Shelvan whispered. 2 centuries of war, and I touch a Vrakken without fear." "They're good kids," Kira said. "That is the point. They should not be good. They should be warriors." "They can be both." The final scene happened in Kira's classroom. 30 juvenile aliens, 30 different species, all learning together, playing together, existing peacefully in a space that shouldn't work but somehow did. A young Thalorian, maybe 5 years old equivalent, crystals still transparent, raised a manipulator. "Teacher Kira, why did you let the cubs hurt you?" The classroom went silent. Even the other students who didn't know the full story sensed the weight of the question. Kira looked at her arms. The scars were visible. Frostbite damage had left permanent marks. 43 puncture wounds had healed but remained as small divots in her skin. "Because they would have died," she said simply. "And they were kids. And I had a way to stop that from happening." "But you almost died." "Yeah. But they didn't. That's what mattered." "Why?" Kira thought about it. Really thought. Because this was the question, wasn't it? The one everyone kept asking. The one she needed to answer honestly. Because when you see someone who needs help, especially a kid, and you can help, even if it costs you, not helping isn't really an option. At least, not for humans. The 3 cubs were watching from the back of the classroom. Full grown now. Powerful. Dangerous if they wanted to be. One approached, moved carefully through the smaller students. Gently nuzzled Kira's hand. "You hurt yourself for us," it said in carefully learned English. The accent was still rough, but understandable. "I'd do it again. We know. That is why we stay." In the observation gallery above, Station Commander Volkov stood with Elder Vrakken, watching the scene unfold. "I understand now," Vrakken said quietly. "Humans don't calculate cost-benefit for protection. They simply protect." "It's not logical," Volkov agreed. "No." Vrashka's scales rippled. "But perhaps logic is not the highest virtue." Below, Kira continued the lesson. Teaching mixed species young about cooperation, trust, and basic geology. Because she was still, fundamentally, someone who liked rocks and wanted kids to appreciate them. The cubs helped hand out samples, gentle despite their size, patient despite their strength. One student asked if they could touch a cub's scales. Kira nodded. The cub lowered its head, allowing the small alien to run curious appendages over its armor. Trust. Given and received. Worth it, Kira thought. All of it. The pain, the cold, the trial, the politics, the paperwork, the endless meetings about policy reform. Worth it to see this. Predator and prey learning together. Warriors choosing negotiation. Species that should hate each other sharing classroom space. The galaxy had been transformed by one human freezing to keep 3 cubs warm. Not because she was trained to. Not because it was strategic. But because children were dying and she was nearby. The council spent months analyzing human protective instincts. Kira spent those months teaching cubs to share supplies and appreciate sedimentary rock formations. Both thought the other was missing the point. And somehow, in that fundamental misunderstanding, the galaxy found something it hadn't known it needed. Someone who'd burn themselves to keep others warm. Who'd let themselves be pierced to shelter the vulnerable. Who'd freeze to death before letting children suffer. The selfless ones weren't special. They were just human. And that was the most terrifying, wonderful thing the galaxy had ever discovered. Humans who protected because they cared, not because it benefited them. You couldn't negotiate with that. Couldn't weaponize it. Couldn't corrupt it. You could only accept it and hope some of that irrational protective instinct would rub off. 3 cubs survived a blizzard because one human decided freezing was preferable to watching them die. That decision changed everything. Kira still said she'd just done what anyone would do. The galaxy was slowly, terrifyingly realizing only humans would do that. And maybe, just maybe, that made humans exactly the species the galaxy needed.